All right, guys, today we are talking about the amino acids. This is protein. Protein's made of amino acids. And I'm going to have Jordan talk about some of them, not all of them, some of them. One of the amino acids that you may be hearing a lot about, and we've talked about in past seminars, we'll start with glycine. We talked about glycine because we were talking about glyphosate, which is Roundup, and how glyphosate mimics glycine in the body and what a problem that is. So why don't you talk to us, Jordan, about what is it about glycine that's important, and maybe follow up a little bit about what's going on there with Roundup, and is it a big deal, is it not a big deal?
So glycine is the simplest amino acid. It has, I don't want to go into this too much, but it has no stereochemistry, which means it doesn't really matter what orientation it's in, it's always going to look the same to the body. It's the only amino acid that doesn't have that property. So glycine is the simplest amino acid. It's very abundant in the body. It has lots of functions because of this, partially because it's simple, partially because it doesn't have the stereochemistry. It acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain. It acts as both an inhibitory and an excitatory neurotransmitter, depending on the context and which receptor that it's activating. Currently, there's a site on a receptor known as the NMDA receptor complex called the glycine binding site. Taurine and glycine can both bind to that site, and they act as inhibitory or stimulatory depending on what else is going on in the brain at the time. So that's one of its main functions. One of its other main functions is conjugating bile acids. So you have these free bile acids that can be conjugated by taurine and glycine. This makes them more available to do their job, more likely to solubilize these fats, metabolize these fats, break them down, and then get them into the intestines where they can be broken down further. Those are already two huge functions, but then also it's a huge component of proteins in the body, structural proteins, enzymes in the body, because it has this, it's really a small amino acid. It doesn't have stereochemistry, so it's flexible. You can kind of build long chains out of it and make these flexible components for muscles, for enzymes, and for all these other components of your body. So glycine is extremely important for all these reasons. There's lots and lots of stuff that it does. I didn't even cover all of it. There's some implications in blood sugar control as well. So yeah, it's really an important amino acid for sure.
And since you already mentioned taurine, let's talk about taurine just a little bit more. So just recognize here that these two are extremely important in digestion, both in stomach acid production and in bile production. So remember, I said yesterday, please investigate for yourself how many gallbladders have been removed in this country. It's between 700,000 to 1 million a year. When people hear that, they're like, that's impossible. Look it up yourself. What is going on here? Now, if you don't think it has something to do with what we're doing to food and what we're doing to ourselves, well, then listen to the chemistry here, because we're telling you that glyphosate mimics glycine in the body. And we know that some of these things that we're doing to ourselves downstream, like way too much sugar, and how we have poor stomach acid, and what we're doing with fatty liver, and what we're doing with fatty pancreas, and how we're inhibiting certain enzymes from being produced by abusing ourselves via alcohol and sugar and refined carbs. Way too much eating, you get the idea. So guys, look it up, check it out. And we're telling you that things like glycine and taurine really do have something to do with digestion. Anything else on taurine specifically? Maybe some foods that would be super high in taurine.
Yeah, taurine is not considered a proteogenic amino acid, and in fact there's some controversy about whether or not it should be even considered an amino acid at all. And the reason why that is because it's not technically an amino acid. There's no acid component of the molecule. It's a sulfur instead of an oxygen. So and because of that, it does not form proteins in your body. There's no enzymes, there's no structural components of your body that contain taurine. Taurine is exclusively used as a neurotransmitter and as a conjugation component of bile acids. There's a lot of evidence that the body produces enough taurine to sustain itself, even if you're not consuming a whole lot of it from the diet. There is benefit to getting more of it though. So foods that are very high in taurine, I think eggs are very high in taurine.
Yeah, most seafood.
Most seafood is very high in taurine, including seaweed if you're a vegetarian. So yeah, I mean that's the very
So
basic.
people that might benefit from supplementing with taurine are people that have that particular digestive issues. So let me be more specific. If you notice that your poop is floating, or if it's very pale in color, this is what's called fatty stool. You may be somebody who could benefit from supplementing with taurine. So again, there could be other things going on there, but I am just giving you an example of somebody that might benefit from that. Let's move on to some other amino acids here. Talk to us about these branched chain amino acids.
Yeah.
What are they? Why are they important? Is there any one that's more important than others? What do we need to pay attention to there?
Sure, these branched chain amino acids are all similar to glycine, smaller amino acids: valine, isovaline, leucine. Specifically, those are the big ones that we talk about. These are things that will trigger the body to start building muscle, to increase IGF-1, this insulin-like growth factor that will increase muscle size, that will signal for the growth of new muscle, new cells, stuff like that. These branched chain amino acids are particularly important, after working out if you need to rebuild muscle. The one that's mainly triggers this mTOR pathway that is going to signal for the growth of new muscles is leucine. Leucine triggers this pathway way more strongly than the other branched chain amino acids.
Let me just pause real quick. Some of you are going, what the heck is mTOR?
Yeah.
We've talked about this in past videos and seminars, so if you're not familiar, mTOR is the pathway that builds onto what Jordan's describing here, which is the building up of tissue, right? It's an anabolic effect.
Yeah.
All right. So mTOR is that pathway.
mTOR, yeah. So it's spelled mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. That's the pathway that's triggering these growth factors. That pathway is triggered by specific amino acids. So people that eat diets that are very high in protein are going to generally have more mTOR signaling. This is not an mTOR video, I guess.
Right.
So we're not going to go super in depth here. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes you don't want mTOR signaling.
We'll do a whole nother video talking about mTOR. I promise. It is important. It is extremely important, and it's becoming more and more emerging research. But just understand it's the branched chain amino acids, specifically leucine, that really is the main culprit here in signaling mTOR.
I just realized before I said isovaline, I meant to say isoleucine. Isovaline is not commonly found in the body. So yeah, valine, leucine, isoleucine are the ones that you're mainly going to see triggering the mTOR pathway. Yeah, so those are the branched chain amino acids. They're signaling for this growth factor like effect.
Okay. So like Jordan said, after a workout, this is a good time to get some protein in your body and probably some carbs, and let the body do what it needs to do, which is to rebuild itself. How any other amino acids here that you think are extremely relevant for people to understand, know about?
Yeah, I mean, so we could talk about tryptophan maybe a little bit.
Let's talk about. So there is tryptophan. Maybe you guys have heard a little bit about after eating turkey, and that is just a misnomer, right? That's really just you eating way too much food and you're getting tired. But tryptophan is an interesting one, and I think this is not scripted here, but I think what Jordan is going to start to talk about is what's called the tryptophan steal, and what can happen with tryptophan in your body, and other processes here that can affect your brain even. So let's check it out. I'm curious what you're going to say.
Yeah, so I there are a few different things to talk about with tryptophan. I didn't want to go super in depth, but tryptophan is probably the most complex amino acid as opposed to glycine, which is very simple. It has a big group on it called the indole group, and that's the same group that makes up melatonin. That's the same group that makes up serotonin. So you can probably see how that's implicated. Tryptophan is converted into tryptamine, and then tryptamine is converted into serotonin. 5-hydroxytryptamine and then that is converted into serotonin, which is obviously an important neurotransmitter. It's important for mood, it's important for sleep, it's important for regulation of a whole bunch of different things. So that's one of the main functions of tryptophan. The other thing that you're talking about is the tryptophan steal, which there's some other factors that go into talking about tryptophan. So not like, for example, niacin and kynurenine, is that what you're...
Kynurenine,
which you were talking about a little bit. So there's a pathway. So niacin is conditionally essential. So for the most part, people are going to recommend that you're getting a lot of niacin from your diet because tryptophan is not a very common amino acid in foods. Hypothetically, if you were consuming enough tryptophan and you completely somehow managed to cut out all the niacin from your diet, you would still have adequate levels of niacin in your body. And why is that? It's because you can convert some of that tryptophan into niacin. Now that's sometimes a problem, and this is sometimes like not a good thing, because you can, if you're deficient in niacin, if you have way too much or kynurenine in your bloodstream, you can start having the tryptophan stolen away from the enzymes. It's going to convert it into serotonin, and it'll be converted into kynurenine. It'll be converted into niacin instead, which is not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a good thing, depending on the status of the niacin in your body, how much kynurenine is in your bloodstream, how much kynurenine is in your brain. But it's usually, you usually want the tryptophan being made into serotonin and melatonin.
Okay, so is there a way that we can manage this pathway? Because kynurenine seems to have this deleterious effect when it's too abundant, right, in the body. Is there a way that is it just a function of getting more tryptophan, or is there other ways or is it a function of more niacin? Is there what do you think would be the thing here that's
ultimately I think if you're going to be taking large doses of tryptophan, I know some people do this to help treat depression. This is a really common, it used to be way more common than it is, to take 5-HTP, which is 5-hydroxytryptophan, or tryptophan to treat depression. If you're going to be doing that, it's probably a good idea to take larger doses of niacin along with it, because the niacin will inhibit the pathway of turning tryptophan into kynurenine downstream.
Let me just pause there. So I just want to be very cautious here. I'll have Jordan talk about this a little bit more. You want to be very conscientious of supplementing with too much of these neurotransmitters, amino acids that can upregulate serotonin way too much. So 5-HTP, like Jordan's saying, tryptophan, GABA. If you are like saying, well, let me find the natural way to treat depression, and you start taking all of this stuff, you're making a mistake. You're making a big mistake, because if you get way too much serotonin in your brain, you're going to be in the hospital. And one of the ways to do that is to supplement with way too much stuff. So you need to do your research here and understand that. But why don't you talk a little bit about the implications of way too much serotonin being produced?
There's a syndrome called serotonin syndrome.
Let me just time out real quick. I don't want to. It's rare, but I think 95% of people have way too little serotonin, like don't have enough. I think 5% have enough or too much or something like that. It's very rare.
Very rare to get serotonin syndrome. It's very rare to get serotonin syndrome even with pharmaceuticals that are raising serotonin. So people that are on SSRIs, there have even been studies with monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which are things that break down, monoamine oxidase breaks down neurotransmitters. You can make antidepressants that inhibit that enzyme so that it keeps high concentrations of all these neurotransmitters. There have been studies that have shown that even combining an SSRI, something that inhibits the reuptake of serotonin, with an MAOI in small doses of each, even that is not very likely to cause serotonin syndrome. So
but the point is that if you're a person that has high serotonin, because there are people that have unusually high serotonin in their body, it's a bit of an anomaly. But then if you think that your answer to you feeling better is for you to start taking all of these compounds, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to take that because I read this on Google, you're making a big mistake. And literally people need to go to the hospital.
I mean, serotonin syndrome is not like just a thing that can just be treated. You kind of have to just wait it out. I mean, if you get serotonin syndrome from combining tryptophan with an SSRI, tryptophan with 5-HTP, if you're taking a whole bunch of serotonin increasing supplements along with pharmaceuticals, and sometimes you have to be really careful because cough syrups, DXM, is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So if you're taking cough syrup because you're sick or something and you're taking 5-HTP along with that, you might not even know that's an interaction, but there have been cases of people that have been severely injured because of that combination. That syndrome, serotonin syndrome, can be deadly, and it can also cause brain damage. It can cause fevers up to like 104 degrees. It can cause permanent damage. So you don't really want to mess around with serotonin supplements if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know what the interactions are.
Exactly. So that's the takeaway is, I wanted to put out that disclaimer. So kynurenine, maybe we could come back to another time because that's not germane really to this topic. But the point is that tryptophan really does have something to do with serotonin and the brain. And if you don't know, serotonin is one of your feel-good hormones. Jordan can go off on serotonin if you want. Let's hear him go off for a second.
I'll just go off for like a couple seconds. But basically, I mean, the thing about the serotonin system is if you look at the serotonin system compared to every other system in the brain, it's very complex. The serotonin system has checks and balances, and then checks and balances on those checks and balances all over the place. There's only, I think, 4 subtypes of dopamine receptor in the brain. There are so many subtypes of serotonin receptor. It goes up to 5-HT7, and so 1 through 7, and then there's subtypes of those subtypes. So there's 5-HT1A, there's 5-HT2A, 2B, 2C, and then it goes on and on and on like that.
Take a second to Google all of the conditions of low serotonin and the conditions of high serotonin, and you're going to notice you're going to see a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
All right, and that's what Jordan's point here is that there's so much going on with serotonin that you could have symptoms that look like both low serotonin and high serotonin, and we'll do a whole video on dopamine, serotonin, and the other neurotransmitters. But go ahead.
But I mean, and that's not even just it, because even if you have adequate levels of serotonin, you can have up and down regulated amounts of certain subtypes of the receptors. So there has been shown that a lot of people that have depression actually have normal levels of serotonin, but their 5-HT2A receptor is very upregulated compared to the average population. So you have way higher density of this certain subtype, which means that the serotonin, because there's more of it, is more likely to bind there just because there's more of that receptor. And that can cause a whole lot of downstream effects for people with depression, which, I mean, obviously this is a whole other topic, but that's part of the reason why they think that psychedelics are so effective for depression, because those psychedelic drugs can downregulate 5-HT2A receptors almost instantly. So you take the drug and it goes down.
Johns Hopkins University, Roland Griffiths, he's the main researcher right now on this topic, which Jordan is talking about, specifically psilocybin mushrooms. You can look it up yourself. You can just YouTube Roland Griffiths, Johns Hopkins University, and you will see, and he's not the only one, just saying he's one of the most respected lead researchers right now, if you want to learn more about that.
And David Nichols as well. David Nichols is another guy. He has been doing research on 5-HT2A receptor agonists in general, so lots of different psychedelics. He's been doing this since the early 80s, so he's very well-versed, really knows what he's talking about in terms of these drugs.
Well, we're giving you guys a little bit of a preview when we talk about serotonin, dopamine, and whatnot, but you're in for it when we get there. So let's just go back to the amino acids.
So that was the whole side tangent, because tryptophan is really, really kind of an important one for lots of different processes. So we talked about branched chain amino acids. We talked about glycine. We talked about taurine. We talked about tryptophan. Let's see, what else can we talk about? We can talk about lysine, glycine, but lysine. Perfect. So it's glycine without the G. They're not closely structurally related at all. I don't know why they named one glycine, one lysine. They're completely different chemicals. They do completely different things. Lysine is, you might even see it as like a either as a pill or as like a lip balm, like in a stick for people that have herpes simplex, because it's an antiviral against a lot of these viruses. So you take a high dose of lysine, you put this lysine lip stuff on, it can help kill that virus. And it acts as an antiviral for a lot of different viruses. So having adequate levels of lysine is probably a good idea for most people, obviously. Once again, it helps build enzymes. It helps build body structures. Lysine is a charged amino acid, so it's really important usually in the active site of enzymes. So where things bind in the enzyme, you'll usually see lysine residues there to help attract the cofactor, help attract the component, the substrate to the enzyme. Lots of different things that it can do there.
So people may say, well, where do I get this from? Again, guys, it's an amino acid, it's protein. So when you go back to what I was saying the other day about where you get your protein from varied sources is a good idea. So get some from plants, some from fish, some from animals, some from organ meats from time to time. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian, this is where you really need to understand your science. And since Jordan's a vegan, let me allow him to answer that question. So is there any concern about these amino acids? Perhaps taurine would be one, right? Because it's a little bit, so if people want to supplement, if you're a vegan, it may be a good idea to supplement with taurine. Is there anything else people would really need to look at?
So if you want to, if you're a vegetarian, if you're a vegan, even vegetarians can get taurine from eggs. So I mean, if you're a vegan specifically, the taurine that you're getting, your body synthesizes it. So you're never going to have a deficiency state unless you're very unhealthy. But if you want to get extra taurine, you can supplement it. It's a pretty cheap supplement, or you can take, you can eat a lot of seaweed. Seaweed is pretty high in taurine. The other amino acids.
Let me just say one more thing about taurine. Taurine has been shown in many studies to be extremely helpful for people to sleep, along with glycine. So if you're having trouble going to sleep, you could experiment, and I've done this before, and I actually find a big benefit from supplementing with a couple grams of taurine and a couple grams of glycine about 45 minutes to an hour before I get to bed.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. I do find that glycine and taurine are very helpful. They're very helpful for a lot of people, even with like actual diagnosed insomnia. So that could be something to look into. So yeah, if you're a vegetarian, if you're a vegan, you can get taurine from those sources, or you can supplement. It's cheap and it's probably worth it for you. The other amino acid you have to really watch out for as a vegan or vegetarian is leucine. A lot of plant proteins are very low in leucine. It's kind of a misnomer to say that there isn't any. I know people will say like, oh, rice is an incomplete protein. It's not an incomplete protein. It just has very low levels of the leucine. And you can combat that by combining different plant protein sources with each other. So rice and beans has much more leucine content than just the rice alone. You can aim to get a lot of your protein from complete protein sources. If you're gonna eat soy as a vegan, make sure it's fermented soy, because there's a lot of
make sure it's organic.
Make sure it's organic fermented soy. There's a lot of the phytoestrogens, a lot of the deleterious components of the soy can be broken down by fermentation and by aging. So things like natto, things like tempeh, they even have aged tofu, so stuff like that. That's one way you can get a complete source of protein. Soy is very complete.
Very high in lysine.
Leucine and lysine. So soy is actually like on par pretty much with egg protein in terms of like anabolic effects. This has been shown a lot of times.
I said lysine, I meant leucine.
You meant, yeah.
It's at tofu is very high in leucine, very high. But go ahead, what else?
So soy is one of them. Hemp seeds are a complete protein source for vegans. They're a rare complete protein source. Most seeds are not. Hemp seeds are. Hemp leaf powder in general is as well. You can get hemp protein powder that's made out of the leaves. I mean, those are some of the
That's plenty. That's plenty.
Yeah.
Right. So you get the idea. So if you're a vegan and or a vegetarian, pay attention to these foods, get them into your diet, and you're going to be okay. There's lots of even people who are bodybuilders that are vegan that are very successful in what they're doing, but they understand the science, guys. They understand what's going on. So if you want to drive your body hard, you need to understand how to put the engine back together, right? You need to understand how to maintain the engine, so to speak.
So you want to keep these to like 30 minutes, you were saying?
Yeah.
So we have like 5 minutes. I was just thinking there's some other amino acids that we can cover very briefly. Just cysteine. I forgot to mention this. Cysteine is a sulfur-containing amino acid. It's found very highly in things like whey protein. That's actually one of the highest sources that people commonly consume. Cysteine is a component of glutathione, and glutathione is your body's master antioxidant, as a lot of people refer to it as. It acts as an antioxidant for lots of different reactions. It also has neurological benefits. There's some evidence that shows that supplementing with things that increase glutathione can help depression and anxiety and stuff like that. So cysteine is really important for that reason, and it can also protect the liver. There's actually, acetaminophen, Tylenol toxicity can actually be treated by using a form of cysteine known as NAC, N-acetylcysteine, because it's that potent at protecting the liver.
I think NAC is also extremely helpful, has been shown to be extremely helpful for certain autoimmune diseases in high dosage.
So NAC is a form of cysteine that is protected by an acetyl group, which is something I was talking about, I think, in the other video. Essentially, that allows it to be absorbed and more easily assimilated by the body. It prevents it from forming complexes with other amino acids, and it can be absorbed more readily. So yeah, NAC is important for autoimmune diseases, for liver health, for stuff like that. So that's cysteine. Then there's methionine, specifically the form that is very interesting is selenomethionine. Selenomethionine is the same as methionine, except the sulfur is replaced with a selenium atom. Selenomethionine is also a component of redox enzymes in your body. So redox means reduction, oxidation. They help prevent oxidative damage within your cells, and they can also oxidize things that aren't supposed to be in your cells. So they can act as part of your immune response. Food sources of selenium are generally high in selenomethionine. So things like Brazil nuts, things like even garlic is high in selenomethionine. That's another important amino acid. I think those are the other two ones that are interesting to talk about.
I'll just go back to NAC one more time. I'm pretty sure if you guys look this up yourself, I'm almost positive that there's also lots of studies on NAC being a fairly effective antiviral.
Yeah.
You can look that up for yourself, but it's, again, very high dosage. But that was good, man. Is there anything else that we can think of?
I mean, methionine in itself is another sulfur amino acid.
That's another. It's a whole nother. We could just talk about sulfur and what's going on with you. You guys might be like, sulfur? What do you mean sulfur in your body for? Sulfur is like super important, guys. So let's stop here for today. You get the idea. If you have any questions, you can ask at the bottom and we will answer. But hopefully you guys get an idea of why it's so important to vary your sources of protein and what certain amino acids might do for you if you choose to supplement with them. All right, guys, have a great rest of the day.